Good morning, colleagues. It's great to have you with us today on this beautiful Friday. Winter is slowly creeping in on us in South Africa. And Antonio, you based in Europe, so you guys are looking forward to going into summer.
Yes, we are, and indeed it's a beautiful day here. It's 25 degrees, so
Oh,
spring summer is arriving. So
lovely, lovely. So good to know, and a very big welcome to you. Colleagues, this morning we are going to talk about a topic that I think is important to all of us, and it's something that every single one of us are trying to understand. It's the age-old, dilemma of how do we deploy broadband into rural areas. We know the conversation. We've had this dialogue. How do we get the business case to stack up? How do we make it viable and sustainable to consider FTTH, in this case, particularly FTTH deployment into rural areas. Most of you will know that there's been a tremendous amount of work that's been done at national government level. In the recent couple of years, we've seen a lot of spectrum that's been allocated. We've also seen the bylaws for the deployment of broadband that was done as a partnership between the DCDT and COCTA, which addresses issues such as standardization of process and procedures at a municipal level. So that's a big win for the sector. More recently, the rapid deployment policy was published, which deals a little bit more maybe with access to private land. So the DCDT published that. And I think then there's also the Broadband Access Fund, which we know is imminent. And we know that there's quite a bit of movement on the Broadband Access Fund. So when we bring all of these things together, suddenly things become very positive for South Africa in particular. And we think that, there's an opportunity for us to accelerate the deployment of, especially this morning is a focus on fiber into rural areas. So it's a really big pleasure for me to welcome our speaker this morning, Antonio Castano. He's got more than 12 years experience in the field of business development, and specifically with Corning product line management. He started out, as I think is evident, in South America, and he's helped Corning to develop and expand their business in the region. In 2016, he relocated to Europe, where he took on several product management roles, amongst other, overseeing the development and management of Corning's copper connectivity, their fiber enclosures, and their data center solutions. While he was doing that, he worked closely with cross-functional teams, including engineers, designers, and the commercial side of the business to develop and implement strategies which seeks to help Corning's business expansion. So I'm going to, at this point, hand over to you, Antonio. I think you might want to share a screen. I think you will have all the rights if you want to take over.
yep.
Welcome, and thank you very much for your time, and thank you for joining us. Just as a side note, while Antonio brings up his screen, if you feel like it, introduce yourself, which company you represent. Please post comments and questions in the side, so we'll pick it up as we go through the morning. I'll be watching the side chats. So if you've got a question or a comment or something you'd like to ask, then feel free to just drop it into the side chat and we'll pick it up from there. Otherwise, thanks everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us, and we'll chat soon.
Good. So I'll go ahead and start. I have probably a presentation that will last around 35 minutes or so, and then we can have a session on Q&A as well, and take any comments or questions that the audience may have. The presentation will be, I'll be covering today some aspects of fiber to the home deployment. Network planning will be one of them. design and architecture, as well as other considerations, with the aim and the goal to accelerate fiber to the home in rural areas. Um, so first of all, thank you, Jonita, for having me here today, and especially in a day that is so important, 25th of May, African Freedom Day. So thank you for that. Let's move forward and see first a bit of a view in Europe, right? And this is just to trying to set up how Europe is evolving to then shift towards the African continent, right? I think there will be some tendency that will flow from here into Africa. So in Europe, most of the more than 50% of homes are already passed. We are currently at peak build rate, especially in countries like Germany and the UK. And this is happening, or it has happened in countries like Spain or France, where the fiber to the home evolution is ahead of the curve. That the networks were shared or mutualized, and the goal here is to try minimize the expenses in building infrastructure. I will not go into detail in this specific topic in network sharing or mutualization of networks, but it's very relevant when you want to start having your build speed up and starting to pass homes in a very large manner. Another thing we see in Europe is most of the deployments that are going to be happening in the next 5 to 10 years will be around suburban and rural areas predominantly. And this is important to take into account because it is very different to build fiber to the home in a dense populated area than in a suburban or a rural area. Okay. Now, fiber to the home is starting to flourish or is flourishing in Africa. There is a very wide span of fiber to the X or fiber to the home solutions that are relying on full fiber architecture. So we start to see fiber being brought from the central office all the way into the premises. This is taking some this can be done in steps, and some of the steps will be, for example, bringing fiber to the cabinet, and then from the cabinet into the premises. Uh, South Africa is having a very large, just to name one country, is having a very large fiber to the home subscriber growth and subscriber base. And this is happening due to the multiplication of different initiatives. Some of them private funded, some of them government funded. And this is helping in increasing the rate of deployment. And this has happened as well in the US. It is happening as well in Europe that the government, especially to build in rural or suburban areas, are getting involved. When we look at the forecast and some of the charts that we have on the screen, i- Africa is forecasting to reach 9 million fiber to the home pass by the end of 2023. And we see that South Africa, as I mentioned, is probably the one that is driving some of that growth. But we also see countries like Egypt or Algeria in north of Africa that are having a large amount of deployments as well. And then we will see after 23, 24, a progressive growth on fiber to the home deployment rollouts in some other African countries, like, for example, Morocco or Senegal. So Northern Africa is getting a lot of traction when it's coming to fiber to the home deployments. Algeria, to name one, and we will see, for example, today in the subsequent slides, a specific architecture that they are using to deploy fiber to the home, and is expected to become one of the major countries investing massively in fiber to the home. And as I said already, involving both operators with private funding as well as authorities, governments trying to play a role as well. Looking at the fiber to the home panorama in Africa, on the left we see the amount of homes that are yet to be passed, with Egypt showing the biggest number, around 25, 26 millions of home pass that are still left, right? We see South Africa with 15, or Kenya with 11 millions of homes that are still to be passed. If we look at the table on the left side of the screen, apart from the home left to be passed, we have the coverage rate. And as we see, for example, Egypt, which is the largest base in terms of customers that are yet to be passed, it is because there is only 1% coverage in the country. And there are a lot of initiatives currently happening, also with the government being involved to speed up these deployments. So if we take Algeria, Egypt, and South Africa to name some, we have more than 48 million homes left to be passed. And this is a very large bill. Currently, Africa in 2021 shown a 12% coverage rate, and this is expected to double by 2026. And this will happen in some of the countries that you can see right in the middle of the screen that are highlighted in blue. And then as we see home pass increasing dramatically in the next several years, we will also start seeing how homes start getting connected as well, which is the chart that is or the table that is shown in the right part of the slide. We see here the rates and connections of fiber penetration in each of the African countries. For example, the one that is ahead here of the curve is South Africa, but also Kenya is following behind with 4% around. Now, let's look at some. Sorry, I'm a bit cold still. Let's now look at some of the key attributes in the fiber to the home market. Eh, Similarly to Europe, somehow, it's a very fragmented region with a very large geographical diversity, with a lot of different ethnic groups, different languages and dialects. Um, I'm bringing this because it gives an idea of the diversity in each country when it comes to also building fiber to the home. Probably one country will not be the same to the other, and that's something that we, for example, have experienced in Europe. The network architecture in Spain is not the same as it is in Germany. There are similarities, but also large differences. Another key attribute is the civil cost. The infrastructure built represents around 80% of the total cost, and this is driven by high cost in equipment, high cost in civil infrastructure equipment, as well as labor and skills required for fiber optic splicing. Going forward, as we have also seen in Europe, there will be a large shortage of experienced technicians. Splicing fiber, connecting fiber, and bringing fiber smoothly without having a lot of insertion loss or attenuation is something that require certain expertise. It's not like copper networks where splicing or joining a twisted pair was simply are not requiring any sort of skills. And then another attribute in the African region is the wide range of deployment methods. We will see deployments that are going to be aerial or facade. Also, we will see different types of underground deployment, some of them being buried, but maybe in some suburban areas being trenched with ducts or micro ducts. So all these diversity in the different attributes will demand an optimal and efficient deployment strategy. So I'm emphasizing this because there are a lot of partners that will need to collaborate to make this fiber to the home ecosystem works smoothly. Here are some of these partners that I just mentioned. First, the government part, so engaging at the municipal level as well as the national level, and more importantly, drive interest as well from the constituents, so from the society in general. And then leverage a very experienced and trusted red or network of people playing a role in the deployment, ensuring a smooth planning and design, having the funds and finance, as well as having the capabilities to build and then operate. Right? So when we look at the chart on the right part, we see that in the ecosystem there are several parties that play a role. We have obviously the subscribers or end customers, but we also have design engineers. We have the investors that will put money. We have the network integrators, as well as the service providers, and then the local governments. Now, looking specifically maybe into the network operators, some of the considerations that they will need to take into account. First of all is the technology, right? What are the long-term goals? When you are planning to deploy a fiber to the home network nowadays, you need to make sure that you planning a network for the next 10, 15, 20 years at minimum, right? Um, it is not a coaxial network, right? With DOCSIS that you need to upgrade every 3, 4, 5 years and spend money in it. This needs to have a good consideration in terms of technology, caring for things like latency. This during COVID, for example, was extremely important, right? With a lot of people working from home. Network convergence, all the different devices that we see, Internet of Things, homes being connected with many different points. And then bandwidth. Before COVID, downstream bandwidth was the most important part. When we have started to have conferences like this one, upload speed also become critical, right? So the network operators had to invest in this. Now, you also need to consider your customer and what the needs are. So what's the service that you're going to provide to these subscribers? What's the reliability of the network that you want to have so you avoid churn? And at what cost? What's going to be the price that a network operator will offer versus the cost that it takes to build the network so you have a good return on invested capital? And then infrastructure, what it is that you have currently in place. How can you maybe leverage that, as well as what you want to build? So first, because you want to have a low total cost of ownership, ensuring that you build the best with the lowest cost possible. So you will have to consider things like architecture or the maintenance required to operate the network. Ensuring that all these considerations are taken into account upfront will ensure for a future-proof design network. And we will talk now about designing a fiber to the home network. Here we have the different steps that needs to be taken, broken into different buckets to design a fiber to the home network from planning to operating the network. So the first step, I mean, we cover a bit of planning. Let's talk about design. You will need to define what the topology of the network is going to be, for example. And the objective of this step is to come across on how to bring fiber to the subscribers, in which areas. What's the density or the minimum take-up rate that you need to have? What are the existing components or infrastructure that you have already available in the field? And the challenge that you will have to overcome are ensuring the efficiency of the resources that you may have. For example, people, that you have a good or a low total cost of ownership. So the investment pays dividends in the amount of time that you require. And then homogeneity, having a design that is homogeneous and can be replicated through the different builds will become critical as well, because you do not want to change and have different designs because it has cost implications. Making a field survey once the design is done to validate feasibility. What we want to do is actually possible to be carried out when you want to deploy. So having the engineers visiting the field, minimizing the variations, again, looking for homogeneity and learning about your infrastructure, assessing the civil infrastructure and the geographies that you will deploy are the challenges to be overcome. And then optimize. So you have done a design, you have checked for feasibility, you need to go back and redo it to ensure that you have a very efficient design, maximizing your fiber placement on the network, as well as the amount of fiber that you want to deploy, minimizing the level required, and ensuring you have your toolbox of the solutions that you will need to have for that deployment. Having all these things into account when you are designing a fiber to the home network will bring so much benefits. A faster design, fewer changes, and all these two replicates on requiring less upfront capital, but also having a more efficient way of deployment. Lower operational expenses, because you will either require less people or you will deploy much faster with the same amount of people. And then better predictability and accuracy. So ensuring that you do not encounter hurdles while you are deploying your network. Now, in the first step, as we saw, designing your network, you will need to start checking your architecture, right? And there are several types of architectures with several trade-offs. So from the bottom up, you will see what we believe will bring a future-ready network. When we look at the time and money required versus a fiber-rich network. As I said, you need to deploy looking at the future and considering what the needs of your subscribers will be in 10, 15 years from now. So what's the fiber richness that you need to have in the field, for example, is something important. The first architecture, starting from the bottom, is distributed tap. It's probably the lowest and the quickest, the one that we will see in the subsequent slides, requiring quite a lot of effort in the designing and engineering portion, and not providing a lot of flexibility. This is several nodes being concatenated. So you need to ensure where those nodes are placed, what the lengths are. It's a bit more restrictive than other alternatives, like, for example, distributed tap, which has a low upfront cost to invest. Um, it's relatively flexible and easy to upgrade if needed, because you will have fiber in the field. And then you have centralized split, which requires a higher upfront investment, but then you will have a very smooth network throughout. Easy to design and engineer, as well as giving a lot of flexibility and a very robust network, and requiring minimal time to execute and implement. Now, let's compare this with what are the fiber to the home concerns and challenges in Africa. And we see here some of the pictures. The first one is diversity, as I mentioned. You have small compounds in rural areas where the infrastructure may not be available. You have gated communities where you may have richer architecture requiring maybe more bandwidth rather than fiber, for example. And then you have some other nuances, like, well, we can see here a little monkey chewing on a cable that is unpredicted. I mean, we have experienced this with our cables and requiring rodent protection. So these are things that you will need to have to take into account or are a concern when you deploy, right? So the diversity in the landscape is a main challenge. Not having government support or not having competition will slow down the deployment because there will be not a lot of consumer uptake that sense. We have deployment costs, as I have been mentioned throughout the presentation already, and then infrastructure challenges in rural areas. In many cases, it may not be there. So this will be a critical challenge to overcome. And then many countries in Africa having landlocked, which will require probably intervention from the government to facilitate this, right? But with all these, the one that we can look at today a bit more into detail is the installation landscape. So the civil infrastructure is not serving all the premises today. We have different gated communities that may have a private duct networks that you will need to ask for permission and check with permission. You have direct varied cables that you may not find unless as you have a sense cable that you can figure out where it is. Aerial infrastructure that is predominant in low income areas, but as well in some dense areas. The initial deployment, because it's the easiest way to recover your investment initially, is the more attractive financially for the operators, is to focus on high end suburbs. But this shift will have to happen, as it has happened in other regions of the world. So there will start, there will be a focus starting soon in shifting toward more suburban or rural areas. The quality of the network is another relevant thing, right? As long as with the infrastructure that you have and who is the owner of this infrastructure. So there is a very wide range of civil infrastructure with a very high diversity of installation landscape that requires a very adaptable and flexible fiber to the home solution. So it can accommodate and have into account all these different varying infrastructure or market scenarios that I have been going through. In some of the pictures here in this slide are representative, with terminals or closes being placed on the pole, in a facade, in an energy pole, with the considerations that that takes in different kind of manholes or handholds being placed directly into the field and being then covered. So when you are gonna go through this, a main decision factor here is what type of deployment I'm gonna be doing. One of them that we have in this slide, which is the one that provides a much higher level of of flexibility, is pre-connectorized hardened connectivity solutions. And then we also have the alternative of doing a full splice solution. And here you can look at the versatility of pre-connectorized hardened connectivity solution. So it brings a very high speed of deployment with a very fast subscriber connection, requiring minimal labor for the installers to go into the field. It provides a very low risk when it comes to deployment and unexpected things to happen while deploying. It does not require a ton of splices or splicing equipment, so you will save also cost on that. Splicing is a very slow process and something that has to be done very carefully. So a pre-connectorized solution provide as well uh, for no need of labor skilled, right? It's just a plug and play solution, so to say, and it provides as well the possibility to build your home pass network today and leave the home connect for later. So defer that investment until you actually have the connection. So you can start already getting paid for that service, right? And your business model will start paying off. Now, on the full splice solution, this changes. It's a solution that is slower to deploy, that requires more planning as well. It carries a higher risk of having, for example, return loss or attenuation, just simply because of the amount of splices you will need to do on the field. If we look at a central office and a subscriber, in a splice network, you will have probably around 10 splices in average, depending on the construction and some other figures. But I will say you will have around 10 connection points throughout the network. So you will have 10 areas of risk when it comes to bringing a very reliable signal to the customers. Let's look now into a pre-connectorized solution that we did um, for um, for Algeria, as I mentioned at the beginning. This is full pre-connectorized solution focused on distributed tap architecture. It's a solution that is completely plug and play, hardened connectivity. Everything can be installed either in poles, facades, handholds, directly buried, um, with all the terminals being linked using pre-connectorized cables. All of it has been tested at the plant before, ensuring for a smooth connection, and it's just really plug and play in these different cables on the different terminals. Um, you do not require a cabinet, for example, on this network. You will just need to put a closer at the beginning of your PON, and then from there, the different terminals that will be concatenated with different signal ratios. And from there, you will also have the possibility to drop, as we can see in the picture, to your customer premises with a single fiber strand. So with a single fiber in a distributed tap architecture, you can connect around 64 homes, um, which is something that you won't be able to do, for example, with a different architectures. For example, in a 1 by 8 splitting level, with a single fiber strand, you will only be able to connect 8 premises, right? And so it is a very fiber lean architecture as well. And the reliability portion that I mentioned with solutions that are hardened, ruggedized for deployment in the field. So here a bit more of detail in this specific case that I mentioned. At the bottom, you can see the different split ratios of this solution. So you will have the same fiber strand or the same fiber going all through the different terminals, one splitter that will separate this split ratio. One will go to the next terminal, and the other fiber will go into an splitter that will split the signal for the drop connectivity. This provides a very durable option for aerial deployments and ensuring minimal maintaining cost, because you will not have to come to maintain any of the terminals. You will only need to go back into the field to really connect your customers. So it is a super fast and easy installation process, minimizing disruptions or the amount of permits that you need to have, and reducing deployment time. Now let's look into a case study on bringing electricity and fiber to a remote village in Uganda. So this is a 4-minute video. I hope that it can be seen. I tried to buffer it before the presentation. So let's hope that you can see it smoothly.
Antonio, is there supposed to be sound?
Yeah, there is no sound.
No.
Let me check on that. Just a minute. Let's give it a try. Let me know, please.
No sound.
No sound?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Then maybe I go into the website.
There are sometimes these embedded.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, we need to see this. Can you hear it now?
No, still not.
Yeah.
Maybe you can post the link in the chat, then people
Yeah,
can watch it as they
I'll do that.
have a moment.
Yeah, I'll do that, and then can go back to the presentation. I'm putting it in the chat now. So
There's several questions, so I wonder if we'll. You still got 1 or 2 slides to wrap up, hey?
yeah, I
Okay.
do. I have shared the video. So let me go back into presentation mode, and then we can continue. Okay. So 2 more slides. As Juanita said, the first one, fiber to the home network planning wrap up. This is about uh, sharing. I mean, the deployment of fiber to the home will start a bit is starting in Africa, and there are some learnings that we can take from other regions. So sharing network models, sharing do's and don'ts, and expertise can be very relevant. For example, one of the things that we notice is ensuring the fiber to the home ecosystem is there between municipalities and operators and or governments, as well as the people who will actually build the network. It's very, very important. Another thing to keep in mind is the diversity. and the challenges that you will need to overcome. Diversity when it comes to different countries, to different scenarios to be taken into account, and the different set of challenges that you will have if in the different areas to build, considering high deployment costs, several infrastructure issues that you will have to overcome, and a very wide range of installation methods. Then the considerations when it comes to actually deploying the network, long-term goals, technology choices, or the bandwidth requirements that you want to offer to your customers. Looking for first homogeneity and then solutions that are highly adaptable and flexible to the different set of scenarios that we have brought up today. And then collaboration across the different parties in the fiber to the home ecosystem will be a must. And we do play a small role in this ecosystem. Um, we are the equipment supplier for the operators, and we have a very wide range of experience. We have been doing fiber to the home deployment for many years now in many different areas of the world, in the US and Europe, but also South America or Southeast Asia, just to name some. So we do have the experience, so you can lean on us or leverage on us to help throughout this fiber to the home deployment, to help you evaluate the different options that you have when it comes to ensuring a smooth transition to fiber to the home. And with this, we can maybe go to questions. Juanita, as you mentioned that we have some in the chat.
Sure.
Let me maybe
Okay.
stop sharing. Yeah.
All right, so let's start. First is our colleague Peter Mello. Peter's with the DCDT, which is a government department, and he's asking. He's got four questions. So the first question is: are there standard network planning parameters that can be considered when designing a fiber to the home network?
There are several parameters, yes, to be considered. So I think that I covered some of them when it comes to first looking at the different parts of the network. So planning, design, ensuring the possibility to build a network, and then evaluating it again. So you have a network that is fully proven by the time that it comes to deploy. And there are in each of those steps objectives to be accomplished as well as challenges to overcome.
Then the next question is, what are technical innovative solutions that can be explored to complement fiber to the home in rural areas?
One of the things that will be different when it comes to building fiber to the home in rural areas is that you will need more cable with more fiber and less hardware equipment. So the cable span will be much longer than in a urban area, right? And with that in mind, there are several solutions that we could discuss when it comes to having long span of cables with very small outside diameters that contain a high amount of fiber for a fiber-rich network. And then when you look at the hardware side, having plug-and-play solutions, it's as we saw, we call it, for example, at Corning Evolve, which is probably the smallest solution out there with providing the highest density and highest speed to connect out there. So there are several solutions, and please feel free to engage with me or with us to really look into those more into detail.
Then something that I think you may possibly not be able to answer, it might not be because I think it's quite specific, is that, are there other things that operators can sort of bundle with the FTTH solution to make it slightly more viable? I know that in South Africa, some companies are looking at providing some backup power, UPSs, because, we've got challenges when it comes to electricity. So that's some of the stuff. I know that people are even looking at how they can provide solar power or solar panels together with a solution to ensure better uptime. But is there something in Europe that you see that operators are doing? Also, operators in Europe are vertically integrated. It's different in South Africa, where we've got lots of open access networks. But is there something that operators in Europe are doing that to enhance the FTTH adoption or uptake, or even ARPU?
Yeah, not a lot apart from pure sales and marketing of the solution. One of the things they are trying to do is convergence, right, of the different services. So bundling different services into one offering is what they try to do. But we do not see in Europe a lot of cases of the telecom service provider being also the electricity provider, for example, right? So you bundle these kind of solutions or this kind of utility approach, right? We don't see many of those into Europe.
Okay, and then question 4 from Peter also says, what are the strategies, interventions that can be employed from both public and private sector to address some of the challenges that you pointed out in your slide 11?
Let's maybe go to slide 11.
That'll be good, because there's also a question around slide 15, which we'll get to just now.
Okay. So I'm in the slides again. Okay. Slide 11 and the different landscape. So if I'm not mistaken, the solution was around, the question was around strategies, interventions that can be employed by both public and private sector to address these challenges, right? One of them is for the operators to work with local communities or municipalities to get funding, right? That's something that we, for example, are seeing in Europe, that the operators are the one actually that lobby the different municipalities to try to try getting them to buy into performing a fiber to the home deployment. Uh, when it comes to the private sector and requesting funding, we have seen in several countries as well that there is a neutral host that gets created by a main operator. And maybe I'll bring up a case that will simplify what I'm saying, or uh, put an example of what I'm saying. So in Germany, we have Telefonica, right? Telefonica had a copper network, sorry, a coaxial network in Germany, but they wanted to start building fiber to the home. What they did is they created new carrier, kind of acting also as a neutral host. They call it UGG, but that UGG is made by two different parties. One of them is Telefonica as an operating party and build party, and then an investing fund, right? In this case, Allianz. So there is a joint venture set up. One of them provides the fund, the other one provides the expertise, and with that, you can get into a fiber to the home deployment, ensuring that you have the fund as well as the expertise. And then you can monetize, apart from the service that you will provide to your subscribers, the infrastructure that you have built to then resell it to other operators, maybe. So there are several strategies that can be taken to overcome some of these challenges.
Thanks for that, Antonio. Yeah, I mean, we can talk quite a bit around this topic, because I think even in South Africa, we've seen very particular solutions being adopted. But then, of course, we also know that the Broadband Access Fund is imminent, and that's trying to address specifically, lower income areas. There's a message from Gerald. Gerald, I don't know where you're from, Haystack. He's saying, in your opinion, what would be the main cost drivers in fiber to the home construction going forward? And then he explains a little bit more. He said, what will make or break the model in light of lower build cost being central to providing a lower cost service? So obviously, in a lower income area, you've got lower ARPUs. So therefore, you can it's in the chat as well if you want to read it.
Yep.
What would be the
Yep. No,
main
I've
cost drivers in FTTH construction?
the main driver is going to be civil infrastructure, and choosing the best civil infrastructure to deploy with, right? Microducts or trenching, putting chambers is normally very expensive, but on the other hand, it ensures that the network is better taken care of, right? That if you put it on an aerial network, and have the equipment on the pole. So I would say the main consideration there, the main cost driver for a fiber to the home build will be the civil infrastructure build, and then it'll be around the total cost of ownership, considering labor and time to deploy and the equipment that you use, right? So equipment and then time will be the other cost drivers that will need to be taken into account.
He also says that the main elements that will ensure long-term cost of ownership is balanced in line with income, securing the required return on investment. But I think we've pretty much answered
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I mean, and this has the variability in this last question is around also the take-up rate, right? So how do you ensure that the customers actually pick on the service? And this will be probably more of a question to an operator and how they pretend to mark up this.
Yeah. And then there's also sort of strategies to market, and we know that different
Right.
operators are employing different. Some people have got, employ young people to do home knocks and drops, and have competitions and go and speak at schools, etc. to get adoption going. Vincent's asking, with the architecture presented in slide 15, the chain connection, don't you face a
Yeah.
problem of optical budget that's different for each subscriber?
No, you don't. And the reason why is the first splitter that you have on the terminal, inside the terminal, so each terminal has two splitters. The first splitter that you have here, it has different split ratios. So the closer that you are, for example, with to the pond, the higher the split ratio will be to the subsequent terminal, right? So for instance, you will have, if this, in the example, let me maybe bring it up larger. This splitter, if it is the first one in the concatenation of terminals, you will probably have a split ratio of 90-10, right? 90% of the split signal will get into the next terminal, 10% will only go into the second splitter. And with this, you ensure that you can carry a higher optical signal to the subsequent terminals.
Thank you. And then Andre actually builds on this question, and he said, is there a line speed limitation on that architecture?
No, you have the optical budget limitation at some point. So you will run out of optical budget, and then the signal will not pick up. But when it comes to downstream or upstream speeds, you should not see a limitation in any of the 64 subscribers that you will have with a single pump, for example.
Okay, I think
Antonio, this is Michał speaking. I think the important element here is that we are having tools to calculate that budget which left for the network assumptions which each of the operator has. Sorry for jumping in, but I thought that it might be important.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Michelle. I mean, you need an optical loss budget calculator, and we have tools like that, so we can certainly model these and help on where each terminal would need to be placed, right? So that's something available, absolutely.
great.
Thanks.
Thanks, Antonio, and thanks, Michelle, for jumping in there. Okay, so the only thing I think that is left to be done is if you could pop your contact details in the chat if somebody wants to ask an off-list question, or you can also.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Gershon. Sorry, I didn't even see that. Hello, Gershon. Let me just see, Ali. Sorry, Ali, for missing your question. I don't know why I don't see it.
Um, I don't see it either. I'm right now looking at the chat, but maybe it was around how important is the know-how to know how the operators have dealt with an issue of asset ownership on state-owned networks. Um, what I could say the best way to deal with this is through a neutral host operator, right? A regulator behind of that neutral host, but the neutral host would be the one that will help. It will not be a state owned, or the neutral host can be a state owned as well, but the asset ownership will be with a neutral host and not with a specific operator.
And then just another question from my colleague Alfred Mashishi, who's also with the DCDT. He says, what has been the quickest time taken in deploying fiber to the home with combination of the simple solutions and models, especially in rural areas? And what was the methodology that was used?
That's a very difficult question to answer. It's a good question, but difficult to answer because of all the different variabilities that you have. I mean, um, if you're looking for speed in terms of deployment, I would say a pre-connectorized network is going to be the fastest. I cannot tell how long because it will depend on the density area and the number of subscribers and the size of the bill, right? Uh, but that will be certainly the fastest way to build in terms of deployment.
And it will probably have to be aerial.
And it'll probably have to be area. So at the moment that you enter into building civil infrastructure, your deployment will slow down.
Yeah, so you can move
Deployment speed.
faster.
Yeah.
Yeah, so pre-connectorized. Some of the other benefits, and it's a challenge for us in South Africa because on the one side, we're under tremendous pressure to create jobs. So, jobs in our sector, it's like in every meeting we talk about how do we create jobs and opportunities. And fiber deployment actually is quite a labor intensive,
Yep.
so we want to create jobs. To some extent, pre-connectorized removes that need, but at the same time, we've also got a skills deficit. So, when you use pre-connectorized solutions, it sort of solves for that problem, and especially rural areas where skills become a bigger problem, an even greater problem. I just want to make sure that I've addressed Ali's question. He says, how has Europe and South American countries been able to leverage the fiber capacity owned by state-owned entities? So SOEs have got their own fiber. How has Europe and South America put mechanisms in place to actually use this? And if that's the case, what arrangements were made and what methods were used?
Mm, I'm not sure I I got the question, Juanita. Maybe.
What he's saying, Antonio, is that I'm going to use South Africa as an example. So in South Africa, we've got quite a bit of government fiber that has been deployed. So either municipalities have deployed infrastructure or PRASA. I know PRASA owns some infrastructure, which is our railways.
Yep.
Is there an opportunity to leverage that infrastructure? And how can that be? We've also got like entities like Broadband, Infrago, Centec, some other SOEs that are deploying infrastructure, and can and should this be used to play a role in either providing backhaul or FTTH solutions?
Mm, okay. I think I'll go back to the neutral host model as a way for governments to have visibility of the network that has the fiber that has been deployed and how that can then be marketed or sell or wholesales or resell. That's a different thing, but I think that's, for example, what I have seen in Brazil, with FiBrasil being a neutral host created by 2-3 operators that put their networks there, and then FiBrasil is the one that runs the network, backhaul, front haul as well, right? So that I would say is one of the easiest way. I mean, you can think about many other different alternatives probably, but that I would think is an easy way to do so.
Okay, if I haven't missed anybody, I think we've now been in the Q&A room and we've looked at the chat. I don't see any new messages. Thanks, everyone. Sorry, we've run 4 minutes over time, but yeah, you've got Antonio's contact details. If you want to ask additional questions, you're welcome to reach out to him directly. He might even refer you to the local team. I see Belinda's got her hand up quickly. And it's gone again. But yeah, everybody, there will be a sanitized version that will be distributed by Risha, so that'll go out to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're definitely hosting more and more of these sessions as we take our beautiful country forward and make sure that we #leave no one behind. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Chat soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.